My name is Brian Marshall, a 34-year-old software developer who spent the last 5 years paying my parents' mortgage. I never expected anything in return, just wanted to help them retire comfortably. Then came the announcement that shattered everything. They were giving their house to my sister Natalie as a wedding gift. The same house I had invested over $120,000 in. The betrayal was just beginning. If you're watching this now, let me know where you're viewing from. Hit that like button and subscribe to join me through this painful family journey. I grew up in a middle-class neighborhood in Portland with my parents, Arthur and Dorothy Marshall, and my younger sister Natalie. We weren't wealthy, but we had enough. Dad worked as a high school history teacher while Mom ran a small bookstore downtown. They were hardworking people who taught me the value of education and perseverance. From an early age, I noticed the subtle favoritism toward my sister. When Natalie wanted ballet lessons, they found the money somehow. When I needed a computer for programming classes, I mowed lawns for a year to buy one. I never resented this because I understood Natalie was the baby of the family. She was 4 years younger, naturally charismatic, and frankly, more social than I ever was. While Natalie pursued a communications degree and jumped between jobs, I focused on computer science. College wasn't easy for me. I worked part-time at a tech repair shop, took out student loans, and rarely slept more than 5 hours a night. By my senior year, I'd already secured a position at a promising startup developing healthcare software. The startup life was brutal but rewarding. 80-hour weeks, ramen dinners, and sleeping under my desk were common, but I thrived on the challenge. 5 years in, our company was acquired by a tech giant, and my stock options suddenly made me wealthy. Not billionaire wealthy, but comfortable enough to buy a nice condo in the city and start thinking about investments. That's when my parents' financial troubles began. The recession hit their retirement accounts hard, and Mom's bookstore was struggling against online competitors. Dad developed back problems that made teaching increasingly difficult. Their mortgage had reset to a higher rate, and they were falling behind. "Brian, we hate to ask this," Mom said during a Sunday dinner 5 years ago, "but we're thinking about downsizing. The house is too much for us now." The thought of my parents leaving their home of 30 years broke my heart. This was where I grew up, where all our Christmas photos were taken, where Dad built the treehouse that I later turned into my first programming office. I couldn't let them lose it. "What if I help with the mortgage?" I suggested. "Just until Dad's retirement pension kicks in fully." The relief on their faces was worth every penny I would eventually spend. We worked out an arrangement. I would cover the $2,000 monthly mortgage payment, and they would maintain the property and pay the utilities. Dad was 3 years from full retirement benefits, so I figured it was a temporary solution. "You're our rock, Brian," Dad said, hugging me tightly. "We'll make this up to you someday." Meanwhile, my sister Natalie had moved to Chicago to work in public relations after college. She visited a few times a year, usually when she needed something: money for a new car, help with her apartment deposit, or connections to potential clients. Our parents always spoke about her with glowing pride, even though she rarely helped them with anything. "Your sister is building her career," Mom would explain when I pointed out the imbalance. "She'll be in a position to help later." I accepted this as part of our family dynamic and continued supporting my parents. As the months turned into years, the arrangement became our new normal. I never asked for repayment, though I did assume that the house would eventually become part of my inheritance, since I was essentially buying it a second time. 3 years into our arrangement, I purchased a vacation property near Lake Oswego. It wasn't extravagant, a 3-bedroom cabin with private lake access, but it became my sanctuary. Whenever the pressure of work became too intense, I would spend weekends there fishing, hiking, or simply sitting on the deck watching the water. My best friend Marcus was the only person who questioned my continued financial support of my parents. "Dude, you realize you're being taken advantage of, right?" he said during one of our fishing trips. You've been paying their mortgage for years now. Have they ever mentioned paying you back? It's not about that, I argued. They're my parents. They supported me for 18 years. Marcus shook his head. There's a difference between parental obligation and what you're doing. You're buying them a house they'll probably leave to both you and your sister, meaning you'll end up paying for half of her inheritance too. His words bothered me, but I pushed them aside. Family was family. Besides, my parents had always referred to the house as the family home, and talked about how it would stay in the family after they were gone. I interpreted this to mean they understood my investment and would ensure it was protected. By the 5-year mark of our arrangement, I had paid over $120,000 toward their mortgage. Dad was now fully retired, and Mom had closed her bookstore but picked up part-time work at the local library. They could have managed the mortgage payments on their own at this point. But whenever I brought up transitioning the responsibility back to them, they found reasons to delay. The property taxes went up this year. Or, we had to replace the water heater. They would explain. Wanting to be a good son, I continued paying without pressing the issue. In retrospect, I should have listened to Marcus. I should have formalized our arrangement with proper documentation. I should have noticed the red flags. But when it comes to family, rationality often takes a backseat to emotion. And I was about to learn that lesson the hard way. The bombshell dropped 6 months ago when Natalie announced her engagement to Derek Johnson, a successful real estate developer she had been dating for just over a year. Derek came from money and had connections throughout the city. Natalie had hit the jackpot. And our parents couldn't have been more thrilled. We're so excited for the wedding, Mom gushed during our video call. Derek's parents are talking about a ceremony at the Lakeside Country Club. Can you believe it? I was happy for my sister. Despite our differences, I wanted her to find happiness. When she asked me to be part of the wedding party, I agreed immediately. And when the budget discussions began, I offered to help with the costs. That's so generous, Brian, Natalie said. We were hoping you might cover the photography and videography. Derek's parents are handling the venue and catering, but they thought we should split the other expenses. The photography and videography package they had selected came to $12,000, significantly more than I had anticipated but still manageable. I wrote the check without complaint, reminding myself that this was a once-in-a-lifetime event for my sister. A week before the wedding, our parents invited both Natalie and Derek and me to a special family dinner. I assumed it was a traditional pre-wedding celebration. Perhaps their way of participating in the festivities since Derek's parents were handling most of the formal events. We gathered at my parents' home, the home whose mortgage I had faithfully paid for 5 years. Mom had prepared all of Natalie's favorite dishes. And Dad had opened a bottle of champagne he'd been saving for a special occasion. We have an announcement, Dad said after dinner, raising his glass. Your mother and I have been thinking about what we could give you both as you start your new life together. My heart warmed at his words. It was nice to see my parents acknowledging both Natalie and Derek as they began their marriage journey. We know that buying a home in today's market is difficult for young couples, Mom continued, smiling broadly. So we've decided to give you our house as a wedding gift. The champagne in my mouth suddenly tasted like vinegar. I struggled to swallow as the words registered. The house? I repeated, certain I had misheard. Yes, Mom exclaimed. We've already spoken to our lawyer. After the wedding, we'll transfer the deed to both your names. You can move in whenever you're ready. Natalie shrieked with delight, jumping up to hug our parents. Derek looked stunned but pleased, already talking about the renovations they could make. No one seemed to notice that I hadn't moved or spoken. What about? I finally managed, my voice barely audible over their excitement. What about the mortgage payments I've been making? A brief silence fell over the room. Dad cleared his throat uncomfortably. Well, son, that was your gift to us. This is our gift to your sister. And you. Mom added quickly. You'll always be welcome here. Welcome. In the house I had been paying for. The house that was now being given to my sister and her wealthy husband. The house that represented $120,000 of my money. I struggled to find the right words. I thought when we made that arrangement, the understanding was that the house would stay in the family. That it would be part of my inheritance too. Dad's expression hardened slightly. Nothing was ever put in writing, Brian. We appreciated your help, of course. But this is still our house to do with as we choose. And Natalie needs it more than you do. Mom added. You have your condo in the city and that lovely vacation home. Natalie and Derek are just starting out. Just starting out. With Derek's family money and connections. With his 6-figure income and partnership track. With Natalie's new job at a prestigious PR firm that Derek's father had helped her secure. Meanwhile, I had worked myself to exhaustion for years, made wise investments, and chosen to help my parents rather than upgrade my own lifestyle. I see, was all I could manage to say. The celebration continued around me as I sat in stunned silence. Natalie and Derek discussed which bedroom would become their home office, which walls they would remove to create an open floor plan, and how they would modernize the kitchen that still had the same countertops I had helped Dad install when I was 16. After dinner, I pulled my parents aside while Natalie and Derek explored the backyard, already planning the landscaping changes they would make. Do you understand what you're doing? I asked, trying to keep my voice level. I've paid over $120,000 toward this house. And we're very grateful, Mom said, patting my hand. But surely you didn't expect repayment? It was a gift, wasn't it? A gift with an understanding, I insisted. I helped you keep the house in the family. And it is staying in the family, Dad countered. With your sister. What about me? The question came out more plaintively than I intended. Mom smiled sympathetically. Honey, you don't need this house. You're doing so well on your own. Natalie and Derek need a proper family home. Especially when they start having children. There it was. The grandchildren card. The implication that Natalie's future children would somehow be more valuable than anything I could contribute to the family. I left soon after, driving straight to my vacation home by the lake. I needed space to process what had just happened. I called Marcus from the road, barely able to explain through my anger and hurt. They did what? He exploded when I finally got the story out. After everything you've done for them? They said it was always their house to do with as they pleased. That my payments were just gifts? That's complete bull. Marcus fumed. Did you ever get anything in writing? I hadn't, of course. These were my parents. I had trusted them implicitly. You need to talk to a lawyer, Marcus advised. There might be something called promissory estoppel that could help you recover your money. But even as he spoke, I knew I wouldn't pursue legal action against my own parents. Not because I didn't have a case, but because doing so would irrevocably damage our relationship. Despite their betrayal, some part of me still hoped there was an explanation. A misunderstanding that could be resolved. That hope was misplaced. In the days that followed, neither my parents nor Natalie reached out to acknowledge my feelings or discuss the situation further. The wedding preparations continued as if nothing had happened, and I was expected to fulfill my role in the wedding party with a smile. The following weeks were some of the most difficult of my life. I went through the motions at work, but my mind constantly returned to my parents' betrayal. During sleepless nights, I calculated exactly how much I had invested in their home, $120. 000 in mortgage payments, plus another $15,000 for a new roof 3 years ago, and $8,000 for foundation repairs last year. Not to mention countless weekends spent maintaining the property, mowing the lawn, and helping with repairs. All of that investment was now being handed to Natalie and Derek, who had contributed nothing. I replayed conversations with my parents over the years. searching for clues I might have missed. There were many times they had referred to the house as the family home, and talked about how important it was to keep it in the family. I had interpreted those statements as acknowledgement of my contribution and a tacit promise that the home would eventually benefit me as well. "We'll make this up to you someday," Dad had said when I first offered to help with the mortgage. What exactly had he meant by that? I attempted several conversations with my parents, hoping to reach an understanding. Each attempt ended the same way. "We never promised you would get the house," they insisted. "We're grateful for your help, but what you did was a gift. Gifts don't come with conditions." When I pointed out that they had effectively asked me for a $150,000 gift while giving nothing to me and everything to Natalie, they accused me of keeping score. Family doesn't keep tabs. The question caught me off guard. No one had asked how I felt about the situation. They had only told me how I should feel. "I want to be," I admitted. "But mostly I just feel used." Melissa nodded sympathetically. "That makes sense. It's hard to celebrate someone else's gain when it comes at your expense." Her validation was unexpectedly powerful. For weeks, my family had made me feel unreasonable for being upset. Hearing someone acknowledge the legitimacy of my feelings was like a weight lifting. We exchanged numbers at the end of the night, and Melissa's perspective became increasingly valuable in the weeks that followed. On the advice of Marcus, I consulted with an attorney about my options. The consultation was sobering. Without written documentation of the arrangement, it becomes very difficult to prove there was any agreement beyond a gift, the attorney explained. "You could potentially argue promissory estoppel, but that would mean suing your parents, and family court cases are messy and expensive. What about just recovering the money I put into the house?" I asked. "Again, without documentation that these were loans rather than gifts, you'd have a difficult case. The court tends to view financial assistance between family members as gifts unless explicitly stated otherwise." I left the attorney's office with the clarity that legally, I had few options. This would need to be resolved within the family, if it could be resolved at all. As Natalie and Derek settled into their newly acquired home, I retreated to my vacation property by the lake. The distance helped ease the immediate pain, but the sense of betrayal lingered. I reduced contact with my family, limiting our interactions to brief phone calls and declining Sunday dinner invitations. "You can't avoid us forever," Mom complained during one call. "We're still your family." "I'm not avoiding you," I replied. "I'm taking the space I need to process how I feel about what happened." "You're punishing us," she countered, "after everything we've done for you." The irony of her statement was not lost on me. After everything they had done for me? What about everything I had done for them? As weeks turned into months, I gradually came to accept that the money was gone. What I couldn't accept was my family's dismissal of my feelings and their refusal to acknowledge the imbalance in how they treated Natalie and me. That wound remained raw and festering, setting the stage for the next crisis. 2 months after the wedding, I was spending a peaceful weekend at my lake house. Fall had arrived, painting the surrounding forest in vibrant reds and golds. I had invited Melissa for dinner. Our friendship had been developing into something more over the past weeks, and I was enjoying the slow, thoughtful progression of our relationship. The doorbell rang 2 hours before Melissa was due to arrive. I opened the door to find my parents standing on the porch, suitcases at their feet. "Surprise!" Mom said, moving forward for a hug as if the past months of tension hadn't happened. "What are you doing here?" I asked, not returning the embrace. "We've decided to take you up on your offer," Dad said, picking up their suitcases and moving toward the door. I blocked the entrance. "What offer?" Mom looked confused. "To stay here at the lake house. You've always said we're welcome anytime." That was true, before they had given away the house I was paying for. The casual invitation had been extended years ago, when our relationship was different. "I have plans tonight," I said. You should have called first. Plans can be changed, Dad replied dismissively. We're talking about a more permanent arrangement anyway. Permanent? I repeated, a sinking feeling in my stomach. Mom nodded enthusiastically. Natalie and Derek need their space as newlyweds. We thought it would be perfect to move in here. You hardly use this place except on weekends, and there's plenty of room for all of us. I stared at them in disbelief. After giving away the house I had been paying for, they now expected to move into my vacation property? Without even discussing it with me first? That's not going to work, I said firmly. What do you mean? Dad's expression darkened. We've already told everyone we're relocating to the lake. The moving truck is coming next week with the rest of our things. You made these plans without talking to me? I could feel my blood pressure rising. This is my house. I paid for it. I never offered to let you live here permanently. We're your parents. Mom said, as if that explained everything. Family helps family. Like you helped me? The words escaped before I could stop them. By giving away the house I paid for? Are you still hung up on that? Dad's voice rose. For God's sake, Brian, let it go. We needed to give Natalie something to start her married life. And what did you give me? I demanded. Besides a bill for $120,000? We gave you life, Mom interjected. We raised you, fed you, clothed you. That's what parents are supposed to do. I shot back. It's not something special that entitles you to take advantage of me for the rest of my life. The argument escalated quickly, decades of unspoken resentments spilling out. My parents accused me of being selfish and ungrateful. I accused them of favoritism and manipulation. The conversation grew increasingly heated until I finally said what I had been holding back for months. You can't stay here. Not for a night, not for a weekend, and certainly not permanently. This is my property, bought with my money, and I get to decide who lives here. Mom's face crumpled. You would leave your own parents homeless? You're not homeless, I pointed out. You chose to give away your home. That was your decision, not mine. You can stay with Natalie and Derek in the house I paid for. They need their privacy, Dad argued. And I don't? I countered. You were willing to sacrifice my investment for Natalie's benefit. Now you can sacrifice your comfort for hers too. Dad's face flushed with anger. I never thought I'd raise a son who would turn his back on family. And I never thought my parents would exploit my generosity and expect me to thank them for it. They left in a fury of slammed doors and peeling tires. I stood in the doorway, shaking with a mixture of anger, guilt, and relief. For the first time in my adult life, I had set a boundary with my parents and held firm despite their emotional manipulation. When Melissa arrived for dinner, she found me still processing the confrontation. They actually expected to move in here? Without even asking you first? She marveled after I explained what had happened. They've always assumed I'll accommodate whatever they want, I said. This is the first time I've really said no. Melissa reached across the table and squeezed my hand. That couldn't have been easy. But from what you've told me, it was necessary. It felt terrible, I admitted. But also, right? Does that make sense? Perfect sense, she assured me. Setting boundaries with family is one of the hardest things to do. But sometimes it's the only way to have a healthy relationship. Marcus expressed similar support when I called him the next day. It's about damn time you stood up to them. They'd been taking advantage of you for years. Despite the validation from Melissa and Marcus, the next few days were difficult. My parents launched what could only be described as a campaign to make me relent. They called constantly, alternating between guilt trips, angry accusations, and tearful pleas. When I stopped answering, they enlisted relatives to call on their behalf. Your parents are devastated, my aunt told me. How could you treat them this way after everything they've done for you? Did they tell you they gave away the house I'd been paying the mortgage on for 5 years? I asked. Or that they planned to move into my vacation home without asking me first? Her silence told me they had shared a very different version of events. The situation escalated when Natalie called, more angry than I had ever heard her. "What is wrong with you?" she demanded. "Mom and Dad can't stay with us right now. We're renovating the entire main floor." "That sounds like a you problem," I replied coolly. "Since it's your house now, you figure it out. They're your parents too. You have all this extra space at the lake house, and you won't even help them for a few months?" "A few months?" They told me they were moving in permanently. Natalie hesitated. "Well, maybe at first, but not forever. Just until we finish the renovations and get the guest rooms set up properly." "Which will take how long? 6 months? A year? And then what's the next reason they can't move back? Your pregnancy? The baby's first year? You see where this is going, right? You're being paranoid," she snapped. "And selfish. This isn't like you, Brian. Maybe the old Brian, who let everyone walk all over him. But I'm done being the family ATM with no say in anything." The calls continued for days, growing increasingly desperate. Then, just as suddenly, they stopped. The silence was suspicious but welcome. I began to hope that perhaps my family had finally accepted my decision and were working on alternative arrangements. That hope was shattered when my phone rang a week later with a call from the local police department. "Mr. Marshall? This is Officer Reynolds with the Lake Oswego Police Department. We're calling regarding a complaint filed by your parents, Arthur and Dorothy Marshall." My stomach dropped. "What kind of complaint?" "They've reported concerns about elder abandonment and financial exploitation. They claim you promised them housing at your lake property in exchange for giving their home to your sister. And now you're refusing to honor that agreement." I nearly laughed at the absurdity of the accusation. "That's completely false. I never made any such agreement. We're required to follow up on all elder concern reports," the officer explained. "Would you be willing to come to the station to discuss this matter?" "Absolutely," I agreed. "I have documentation that tells a very different story." After hanging up, I called Marcus, who had become my de facto advisor through this family crisis. "They reported you to the police?" he exclaimed. "That's a new low, even for them. They're claiming I promised them my lake house in exchange for giving their home to Natalie." "That's complete fiction," Marcus said. "But be careful, Brian. These accusations, even if they're baseless, can cause real problems. Take every piece of documentation you have with you." I spent the evening gathering bank statements showing 5 years of mortgage payments, texts and emails with my parents discussing the arrangement, and even birthday cards where they had written notes thanking me for keeping the family home in the family. I also prepared a timeline of events, including the recent confrontation where they had shown up unannounced expecting to move in. The meeting with Officer Reynolds the next day was tense but ultimately productive. I presented my documentation methodically, explaining the history of my financial support and the recent betrayal. "So you never agreed to let your parents live at your lake property in exchange for them giving their house to your sister?" the officer clarified. "Never. The first I heard about them giving away the house was at a dinner a week before my sister's wedding. And the first I heard about them moving to my lake house was when they showed up on my doorstep with suitcases." Officer Reynolds reviewed my documentation carefully. "These mortgage payments were made consistently for 5 years?" "Yes. Every month, directly from my account to their mortgage holder." "And you have no written agreement about repayment or equity in the home?" I shook my head. "They're my parents. I trusted them. I didn't think I needed a contract." The officer nodded sympathetically. "Unfortunately, we see this kind of situation more often than you might think. Family financial arrangements without clear documentation can lead to serious misunderstandings." "This wasn't a misunderstanding," I corrected him. "This was a deliberate manipulation." By the end of our meeting, Officer Reynolds assured me that no charges would be pursued. Based on the documentation you've provided, there's no evidence of elder abandonment or financial exploitation. This appears to be a civil matter, not a criminal one. I left the police station relieved but deeply disturbed that my parents had escalated to such extreme measures. What would they try next? I didn't have to wait long to find out. That evening, I received a call from a neighbor at the lake house. "Brian, I thought you should know there's someone at your property." An older couple. They'd been trying different doors and windows. I thanked him and immediately called the police, then drove to the lake house as quickly as legally possible. When I arrived, a patrol car was already in the driveway. Officer Jensen met me as I approached. "We found your parents attempting to access the property through a back window," he explained. "They claim they live here and were locked out." My parents stood by their car, Mom teary-eyed and Dad defiant. "Tell them, Brian," Dad demanded. "Tell them this is our home too." "It's not," I said firmly. "This property is solely in my name. I purchased it 3 years ago with my own funds. They have never lived here and have no legal right to be here." Officer Jensen turned to my parents. "Mr. and Mrs. Marshall, I've verified the property records, and this house belongs exclusively to your son. If he doesn't want you on the property, you need to leave immediately. He's turning his back on family." Dad exclaimed. "After everything we've done for him." "This is a civil matter," the officer replied. "If you believe you have a legal claim to this property, you'll need to address it through the courts. But for now, you need to leave, or you could be charged with attempted breaking and entering." My parents left. But not before Mom delivered a parting shot. "Natalie would never treat us this way. I don't even know who you are anymore." Their words stung, but I stood my ground. After they left, I discovered they had a spare key to the house, one I had given them years ago for emergencies. I immediately called a locksmith to change all the locks and installed a security system the following day. The family drama was beginning to affect other areas of my life. At work, my performance was suffering due to the constant stress and disrupted sleep. My relationship with Melissa, though supportive, was being overshadowed by the ongoing crisis. Even casual social interactions became awkward when well-meaning friends asked about my family. The situation escalated further when Natalie launched what could only be described as a social media campaign against me. She posted lengthy, emotionally charged stories about how I had abandoned our elderly parents and was hoarding wealth while family suffers. She carefully omitted any mention of the house they had given her or the mortgage payments I had made. Former classmates, distant relatives, and even colleagues began sending me concerned messages, asking why I was mistreating my parents. The public shaming was excruciating, but I refused to engage in the same tactics. When people asked directly, I simply said, "There's more to the story than what's being shared online. This is a private family matter." Through it all, Melissa remained steadfastly supportive. "They're trying to force your hand through public pressure," she observed. "It's a classic manipulation tactic." "It's working," I admitted. "Part of me wants to give in just to make this stop." "That's exactly what they're counting on," she pointed out. "But if you give in now, you're teaching them that these tactics work. The demands will never stop." She was right, of course. This wasn't just about the lake house. It was about establishing that I wouldn't be manipulated or exploited anymore. The most disturbing discovery came when I was reviewing my financial records to ensure my parents didn't have access to any of my accounts. I noticed a pattern in the timing of their financial emergencies over the years. The roof replacement I had paid for had happened just 2 months after they had taken a luxury cruise. The foundation repairs had coincided with their purchase of a new car, not a practical sedan, but a luxury SUV. Digging deeper, I found that my parents had maintained a substantial savings account throughout the years I had been paying their mortgage. They weren't destitute. They had simply chosen to let me cover their expenses while they maintained their lifestyle. When I mentioned this discovery to Marcus, He wasn't surprised. I suspected as much. They'd been playing you for years, Brian. But why? I asked, still struggling to understand. They're my parents. Why would they take advantage of me like this? Because you let them, he said bluntly. And because it was easier than changing their lifestyle, or treating both their children equally. The final straw came when I discovered that my parents had given Natalie a key to my lake house. I learned this when my security system alerted me to activity at the property while I was at work. The camera footage showed Natalie and Derek walking through the house, measuring spaces and discussing furniture placement. I called Natalie immediately. "Why are you in my house without permission?" "Mom and Dad said we could use it for weekends while they're figuring things out," she replied casually. "It's not like you're there during the week anyway." The audacity was breathtaking. "Get out of my house right now. That key was not theirs to give. If you ever enter my property without explicit permission from me again, I will file trespassing charges." "God, Brian. When did you become such a jerk?" she snapped. "It's just a weekend house. It's not like you need it." "That's not for you to decide," I replied. "The answer is no. Now leave. Or I'm calling the police." She left, but not before sending a group text to the entire extended family. "Brian just threatened to have me arrested for visiting the lake house. He's completely lost it." The flood of calls and messages that followed was overwhelming. I turned off my phone and spent the evening changing the locks again and upgrading the security system. The next morning, I received the call that would finally bring this painful family drama to a head. "Mr. Marshall? This is Detective Laura Simmons with the Financial Crimes Unit. We're investigating a report of elder financial abuse involving your parents, Arthur and Dorothy Marshall. This was escalating from annoying to potentially serious. False accusations of elder abuse could damage my reputation and career." "I'm familiar with the situation," I replied carefully. "I met with Officer Reynolds last week about similar claims." "This is a separate investigation," Detective Simmons explained. "Your parents have provided bank statements showing regular transfers from their account to yours totaling over $50,000 in the past 3 years. They claim these were loans that you're refusing to repay." I nearly dropped the phone. "That's absolutely false. I've never received money from my parents. If anything, it's been the opposite. I've been supporting them financially for years. We take these allegations seriously," she continued. "I'd like you to come to the station with any documentation you have regarding financial transactions between you and your parents." This was beyond manipulation, it was fraud. My parents were now fabricating evidence to pressure me into giving them what they wanted. I arrived at the police station with a complete financial history. Bank statements showing every mortgage payment I had made for 5 years, documentation of additional home repairs I had funded, and records showing that no money had ever been transferred from their accounts to mine. Detective Simmons reviewed the materials carefully. "These records don't match what your parents provided." "May I see what they gave you?" I asked. She showed me the statements my parents had submitted. They appeared to show regular transfers to an account number that was similar to mine, but off by 1 digit. The account didn't belong to me at all. "That's not my account," I pointed out. "You can verify that with my bank." Further investigation revealed that the statements had been altered. My parents had fabricated evidence of loans that never existed. "This is a serious matter," Detective Simmons warned when she called my parents in for questioning. "Falsifying financial records and filing false police reports are criminal offenses." Faced with the evidence of their deception, my parents' story quickly unraveled. They admitted to altering the bank statements, claiming they were desperate and didn't know what else to do to secure housing at my lake property. The detective decided not to press charges, viewing my parents as misguided rather than malicious. I was less forgiving. This had gone beyond family disagreement into criminal territory. I requested a formal family meeting with a mediator present. My parents, Natalie and Derek, and I gathered at a neutral location, a conference room at my attorney's office. I brought Marcus for support. Natalie brought her in-laws. I've asked for this meeting because we need to clear the air, I began. The events of the past few months have damaged our family in ways that might be irreparable, but I want to make sure everyone understands exactly what has happened. I presented a detailed account of my financial support over the years: $120,000 in mortgage payments, $23,000 in home repairs, and countless hours of physical labor maintaining the property. I showed evidence of my parents' hidden savings account and their altered bank statements. You've been paying their mortgage? Derek interrupted, looking confused. I thought the house was paid off years ago. The expression on his face made it clear. Natalie and my parents had kept him in the dark about the true financial situation. They told you the house was paid off? I asked. Derek nodded. They said they owned it free and clear, and that giving it to us was no financial burden on them. I turned to Natalie. Did you know I was paying the mortgage? Her flushed face was answer enough. I knew you helped them sometimes, she mumbled. I didn't know the details. You never asked? I pointed out. You were happy to accept the house without questioning where it came from or who had paid for it. My parents sat uncomfortably as their manipulations were exposed one by one. The mediator ensured everyone had a chance to speak, but there was no defending the evidence I presented. What exactly do you want from us? Dad finally asked, his voice subdued. First, I want an acknowledgement of what you did, the exploitation, the manipulation, and the lies. Second, I want an apology, a real one, not an "I'm sorry you feel that way" non-apology. And third, I want this to stop. No more false accusations, no more social media campaigns, no more attempts to pressure me into giving you what you want. And if we do that? Mom asked. What then? Then we can talk about what kind of relationship might be possible moving forward. But it will be on very different terms than before. Derek, who had been increasingly agitated throughout the meeting, finally spoke up. I had no idea about any of this. If I had known, I never would have accepted the house. He turned to my parents and Natalie. This isn't right. We need to make this right. His intervention was unexpected but welcome. As Natalie's husband and someone who apparently had a stronger moral compass than I had given him credit for, his opinion carried weight. The meeting ended with tentative agreements. My parents would issue public apologies for their false accusations. Natalie would remove her inflammatory social media posts. And Derek promised to work with me to find a fair resolution regarding the house. As people filtered out of the conference room, Natalie approached me privately. I didn't know everything, she said quietly, but I knew enough that I should have asked more questions. I'm sorry. It wasn't a complete acknowledgement of her role, but it was a start. The aftermath of the confrontation brought significant changes. Derek, true to his word, proposed a solution. They would refinance the house and pay me back the $120,000 I had contributed to the mortgage. It wasn't a perfect resolution. It didn't account for the interest I could have earned on that money over 5 years, but it was a meaningful gesture toward fairness. My parents' apology came more slowly and with more qualifications than I had hoped, but it did come. We got caught up in wanting to help Natalie, Dad explained during a tense coffee meeting. We didn't think about how it would affect you. We took your support for granted. You did more than take it for granted, I corrected him. You exploited it. Mom wiped away tears. We were wrong, Brian. We treated you unfairly, and we're sorry. Their apology felt incomplete, more motivated by being caught than by genuine remorse, but I accepted it as a starting point. The most important thing was that the dynamics had changed. They now understood that I would no longer be manipulated or taken advantage of. As for Natalie, our relationship entered a new phase, more distant but also more honest. The unspoken favoritism that had shaped our family for decades had finally been brought into the light. While it was painful to acknowledge, it was also liberating. We could now begin to build a relationship based on reality rather than pretense. The community that had been so quick to judge began to see the fuller picture as the truth emerged. Some people apologized for their assumptions, others simply faded into the background. I learned valuable lessons about who my true friends were. Through it all, Melissa remained a steadfast source of support. "You handled that with more grace than most people would have," she told me after the confrontation. "You stood your ground without becoming vindictive." I was tempted, I admitted. Part of me wanted to make them hurt the way they hurt me. "But you didn't," she pointed out. "That's what matters." As the dust settled, I began to rebuild my life on my own terms. The lake house remained my private sanctuary. Though I occasionally invited family members for specific, time-limited visits, my relationship with Melissa deepened, based on mutual respect and clear boundaries. And my sense of self-worth, so damaged by years of family dynamics, began to heal. The journey wasn't over, but the worst of the storm had passed. I had weathered it with my integrity intact and emerged with a clearer understanding of what I deserved in all my relationships. The 6 months following our family confrontation were a time of profound personal growth and healing. Initially, I maintained limited contact with my family, needing space to process everything that had happened. During this period, I focused on rebuilding my life without the constant drain of family obligations and expectations. My relationship with Melissa blossomed in this new, healthier space. Unlike my family, she respected my boundaries and valued my generosity without exploiting it. We began spending more time at the lake house, creating new memories that weren't tainted by family drama. "You seem lighter," she observed one evening as we sat on the deck watching the sunset. "More present." "I feel lighter," I admitted. "For years I've been carrying this weight of family obligation without even realizing how heavy it was." "That's what happens when you're raised to believe your value is tied to what you can provide for others," she said thoughtfully. "You forget that you deserve happiness too." Melissa's insight helped me understand patterns I had never questioned. My entire adult life had been shaped by the belief that being a good son meant sacrificing my own needs for my family's wants. Breaking that pattern was both liberating and disorienting. In this newfound freedom, I began building what Marcus called my chosen family, relationships based on mutual respect rather than obligation. I deepened friendships that had taken a back seat to family demands and formed new connections through shared interests rather than shared history. Marcus, who had been my voice of reason throughout the ordeal, remained my closest friend. "I never thought I'd see the day when you'd actually put yourself first," he remarked during one of our fishing trips. "It's about damn time." 3 months after our confrontation, Derek reached out to me directly. True to his word, he and Natalie had refinanced the house and wanted to deliver the check for $120,000. "I'd like to do this in person," he said, "if you're comfortable with that." We met at a coffee shop halfway between our homes. Derek arrived alone, which surprised me. Natalie wanted to come, he explained, sliding an envelope across the table. "But I thought it might be easier to start with just us." The envelope contained a cashier's check for the full amount and a handwritten note from Natalie. I read it silently. "Brian, I know this doesn't fix everything, but I hope it's a start. I've spent my life accepting the favoritism without questioning it because it benefited me. That was wrong. I'm sorry for my part in hurting you. When you're ready, I'd like a chance to rebuild our relationship, not as the favored child and the responsible one, but as equals. Love, Natalie." Her words were unexpectedly touching. "This means a lot," I told Derek. "Both the repayment and the note." "She's been doing a lot of thinking," he said. "We both have. What happened wasn't right, and we want to make amends." That conversation marked the beginning of a slow reconciliation with Natalie. We started with occasional text messages, then phone calls, and eventually brief visits. Our relationship would never be what it once was, but perhaps it could be something more authentic. My parents' journey toward genuine reconciliation was more complicated. Their initial apologies had been largely motivated by being caught and exposed rather than by true remorse. It took time for them to genuinely reflect on their actions and the damage they had caused. For months after the confrontation, Dad called and asked to meet. He came alone to a park near my office. "I've been seeing a therapist," he began. Which was perhaps the last thing I expected him to say. "She's helping me understand some things about myself and my behavior." He took a deep breath before continuing. "I've always been scared of ending up like my father, broke, alone, depending on the charity of others. I think that fear made me take advantage of your generosity. Instead of being grateful, I felt entitled to it because it eased my fear. His vulnerability was unprecedented in our relationship." "That doesn't excuse what you did," I said. "No, it doesn't," he agreed. "Nothing excuses it. But I want you to know I'm trying to understand why I behaved that way so I don't repeat those mistakes." That conversation didn't instantly repair our relationship, but it opened a door that had seemed permanently closed. In the weeks that followed, Mom reached out with her own acknowledgments and apologies. Unlike their earlier attempts, these apologies didn't come with expectations or requests. Slowly, cautiously, we began rebuilding our relationship on new terms. I made it clear that financial support was off the table, and they would need to manage their own affairs moving forward. To their credit, they accepted this boundary without protest. Our first family gathering after the confrontation was Thanksgiving dinner at Natalie and Derek's house, the house I had unwittingly helped purchase. The atmosphere was initially tense and awkward, but as the evening progressed, moments of genuine connection emerged. "I'd like to say something," Derek announced as we sat around the table. "Brian, I want to thank you for your honesty and forgiveness. What happened wasn't right, and the fact that you're here today shows incredible grace." His acknowledgement set the tone for a different kind of family relationship, one based on honesty rather than manipulation, on respect rather than exploitation. As the months passed, I continued to maintain clear boundaries with my family. I visited on my terms, shared what I chose to share, and no longer felt obligated to solve every family crisis. Sometimes this caused tension, but I remained firm in my resolve to have healthier relationships. My relationship with Melissa continued to deepen. Unlike my family, she celebrated my success without expecting to benefit from it. She supported my boundaries without questioning my love. With her, generosity was a choice rather than an obligation. "Have you thought about what you want long-term?" she asked one evening as we planned a weekend getaway. "For yourself, I mean, not for everyone else." The question caught me off guard. For so long, my plans had revolved around family obligations and expectations. Thinking solely about my own desires felt almost selfish, a lingering effect of years of conditioning. "I want to travel," I said finally. "I've always wanted to see Europe, Asia, South America, but I've been so focused on supporting everyone else that I kept putting it off." "Then let's do it," she said simply. "Let's plan a trip. Just for us." That conversation sparked a new phase in my life, one where my dreams and desires took center stage rather than being perpetually deferred for others' needs. Melissa and I planned a 3-week trip to Italy for the following spring. I applied for a sabbatical from work to focus on a software project I had been developing in my spare time. I began living my life for myself rather than as a supporting character in my family's drama. The most profound change, however, was internal. I no longer measured my worth by what I could provide for others or how much I sacrificed. I learned that generosity is only meaningful when it's freely given, not extracted through guilt or manipulation. My experience taught me valuable lessons about family, boundaries, and self-worth that I carry with me every day. Family relationships should be built on mutual respect and reciprocity, not one-sided sacrifice. Love doesn't mean endlessly giving without boundaries. And sometimes, the healthiest thing you can do for a relationship is to say no. Today, my relationship with my family continues to evolve. There are still difficult moments and old patterns that resurface. But now I have the tools and confidence to address them directly. My parents have largely accepted the new dynamics, though they occasionally test boundaries. Natalie and I have developed a more honest relationship based on mutual respect rather than the prescribed roles we occupied for so many years. As for me, I've found a balance between caring for those I love and caring for myself. I remain generous but with awareness and intention rather than obligation. I've learned that healthy relationships enhance your life rather than depleting it. If my story resonates with you, perhaps you're facing similar challenges with family expectations and boundaries. Remember that you deserve relationships that honor your worth and respect your boundaries. Setting limits isn't selfish, it's essential for genuine connection. Have you ever had to set difficult boundaries with family members? How did you navigate that process? I'd love to hear your experiences in the comments below. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more stories about family dynamics and personal growth. Thank you for listening to my journey. And I wish you courage and clarity in your own relationships.